The coffee synthesizer was lying again. Eli Vasquez stared at the brown liquid pooling in his mug and wondered, not for the first time, whether the machine was genuinely broken or just possessed by the spirit of every bad decision humanity had ever made. The display cheerfully insisted it had produced Colombian dark roast, circa 2089, but the smell suggested it had actually synthesized the concentrated essence of despair with notes of burnt polymer. You know, Eli said to the machine, because talking to malfunctioning equipment was basically his job description at this point, if you wanted to kill me, there are faster ways. The synthesizer hummed in what he chose to interpret as agreement. Station Sigma 7 had been his home for 3 years, 2 months, and, he checked the wall chronometer, approximately 18 hours. Not that anyone was counting. Certainly not him. He definitely hadn't marked each day on the calendar in his quarters like some kind of orbital prisoner, because that would be pathetic, and Eli Vasquez was many things but pathetic wasn't one of them. Probably. The station hung in geostationary orbit above what used to be called the South Pacific, back when people bothered naming things with optimism. Now it was just Sector 7G of the exclusion zone, which was the kind of name you gave things when you'd given up on poetry and committed fully to bureaucratic nihilism. Through the small porthole near his workstation, Earth turned with the patient indifference of a patient who'd stopped listening to its doctors. His comm unit chirped. The sound had been designed by someone who clearly hated maintenance technicians. Vasquez, we're showing an anomaly in docking bay 3. The voice belonged to Chen, the night shift coordinator who Eli was pretty sure was actually 3 raccoons in a uniform. Define anomaly, Eli said, already pulling on his work vest. The vest had 17 pockets, and he'd managed to lose things in 14 of them. Unscheduled docking. No transponder code. No approach clearance. Just, showed up. Eli paused halfway through sealing his thermal gloves. Just showed up. Like magic? Like physics we don't understand, which is basically the same thing. Did you try asking it nicely to leave? Vasquez. Did you try asking it rudely to leave? Sometimes that works better. Chen made a sound that suggested their patience was experiencing rapid unscheduled disassembly. Just get down there and figure out what it is before I have to wake up someone important. The connection cut off, leaving Eli alone with his lying coffee and a growing sense that his evening was about to become significantly more complicated. He took a sip of the coffee anyway, because spite was really the only thing keeping him going these days, and headed toward the bay. Station Sigma 7 had been built during humanity's optimistic phase, back when people thought orbital research platforms would unlock the secrets of the universe. Instead, they'd mostly unlocked the secrets of how to make confined spaces feel even more confined and how to charge 40 credits for a chocolate bar. The corridors were narrow enough that Eli had to turn sideways whenever he passed someone, which wasn't often during night shift. Most of the station's population of 47 souls worked day cycles, leaving the evenings to people like Eli who preferred their existential crises with a side of solitude. Docking Bay 3 sat at the station's far end, past the broken vending machine that had been displaying, temporarily out of service, for 8 months and the recreational lounge where recreation went to die. The bay doors were sealed, which was probably good because vacuum exposure wasn't on Eli's agenda for the evening. The pod sat in the center of the bay like a teardrop made of starlight. Eli stopped walking. Stopped breathing, actually, for a moment that stretched longer than it should have. The thing was small, maybe 3 meters long, and it didn't look like any spacecraft he'd ever seen. No visible seams, no exhaust ports, no identification markings. Just smooth surface that seemed to shift colors depending on how he looked at it, chrome, then pearl, then something that made his eyes water when he tried to focus. Chen, Eli said into his comm, proud of how steady his voice sounded, you want to tell me what I'm looking at? Static answered him. The kind of static that suggested the universe was declining to comment at this time. Eli approached the pod slowly, the way you'd approach a sleeping dog you weren't sure was friendly. His scanner, a beat-up handheld unit that predated his grandparents, couldn't decide what the pod was made of. The readings kept changing: titanium alloy, ceramic composite, biological material, error, please try again. Helpful, Eli muttered. The pod had a seam. Or rather, it developed a seam as he watched, splitting along its length with the whisper-quiet sound of something that had never heard of mechanical stress. Vapor rolled out, cool and faintly luminescent, carrying a smell like ozone and something floral he couldn't name. Inside was a woman. Eli's brain, which had been doing a reasonably good job of processing impossible situations up to this point, briefly went on strike. It filed a complaint, demanded better working conditions, and refused to accept what his eyes were reporting. She was unconscious, curled on her side on what looked like gel that was slowly dissipating into nothing. Dark hair fanned around her face. Standard humanoid configuration: 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. Regular human woman, except for the ears that rose from her temples and tapered to delicate points that extended well past where ears had any business extending. Oh, Eli said, which felt inadequate but was all he had available. Her chest rose and fell. Breathing. That was probably good. Probably. He activated the emergency medical protocol, which summoned a gurney that took 6 minutes to arrive because the station's automated systems had the urgency of a particularly relaxed sloth. During those 6 minutes, Eli stood there wondering if this was the kind of situation where you were supposed to check for a pulse, or if that was rude when dealing with potentially alien life forms. His training had covered vacuum exposure, radiation poisoning, and what to do if someone got their hands stuck in the waste recycler, but unconscious woman with unusual ears in mysterious pod hadn't made the curriculum. The gurney arrived. Together, well, mostly Eli, the gurney just sort of watched. He carefully lifted her from the pod. She was warm, which seemed important somehow. Her skin had an odd quality to it, like there was light just beneath the surface waiting for permission to emerge. Medical Bay 2 was closer than Medical Bay 1, which had never made sense to Eli, but he'd stopped questioning station design choices around month 4. He settled her onto the examination table and stood back, suddenly aware that he was completely out of his depth in waters that might not even be on Earth. Her eyes opened. They were brown. Regular, normal, human brown. Somehow that was more unsettling than if they'd been silver or violet or compound. She looked at him. He looked at her. The medical bay's fluorescent lights hummed their eternal song of mild electrical problems. "Hi," Eli said, because his brain had apparently decided that casual was the way to go. "Welcome to Sigma, 7. I'm Eli. You, crashed our party." "Well, docked. Unscheduled. Which is technically against regulations, but between you and me, regulations here are more like aggressive suggestions." She sat up slowly, taking in the room with the methodical attention of someone cataloging everything. Her gaze swept across the medical equipment, the supply cabinets, the poster about proper hand-washing technique that had been there since before Eli arrived, and finally back to him. Then she spoke, and the words came out like music played through a broken translator, fragments of English, something that might have been Mandarin, another language Eli didn't recognize, all woven together with sounds that his mouth wouldn't know how to make. "Right," Eli said. "So communication might be a thing we need to work on." "That's fine. That's totally fine. I'm great at charades." He held up his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace, realized he might be accidentally communicating something offensive in her culture, then decided he was already committed and waved anyway. She tilted her head, and her ears, those impossible, elegant ears, shifted slightly with the movement. The station's AI chose that moment to chime in, because the universe had a terrible sense of timing. "Unregistered life form detected in Medical Bay 2. Please provide identification and clearance codes." Eli looked at the woman. The woman looked at him. Her expression suggested she understood that they had a problem, even if she couldn't understand his language. "Yeah," Eli said to nobody in particular, "this is going to be complicated." Lyra, or something that sounded like Lyra when Eli's mouth attempted it, had strong opinions about doors. "No, look," You just wave your hand here, Eli demonstrated for the 5th time, passing his palm over the sensor panel. The door to his quarters slid open with its usual grinding protest. See? Wave. Open. Simple. She studied the panel with the intensity of someone decoding ancient hieroglyphics, then placed both palms flat against it and held them there, perfectly still. Nothing happened. You're not waving. The wave is crucial. It's the entire foundation of the door-opening experience. Lyra said something in her language that Eli had started thinking of as melodic frustration, removed her hands, and kicked the door frame instead. The door, apparently startled by this aggressive negotiation tactic, slid open. That works too, Eli admitted. Unorthodox, but effective. 3 days had passed since what Eli had taken to calling the incident, capital T, capital I, because his brain needed to categorize the complete appending of his worldview as a proper noun. 3 days of hiding an unregistered visitor in a space station where privacy was theoretical and surveillance was enthusiastic. 3 days of Eli discovering exactly how creative one could get with maintenance corridor routes and ventilation shaft schedules. Also 3 days of trying to teach alien linguistics to someone while simultaneously learning alien linguistics from someone, which was like trying to build a bridge from both sides simultaneously while neither side agreed on what a bridge was. The translation algorithm had crashed 4 times. Twice it had produced results so nonsensical that Eli suspected the AI was having a breakdown and just generating random words for attention. The 3rd crash had somehow rerouted all station announcements through the waste management system, which had been awkward to explain. The 4th crash had been Eli's fault for feeding it 17 different recording samples of Lyra speaking and asking it to just figure it out. But progress was progress, even if it came in fragments. Earth, Eli said, pointing at the planet visible through his quarters' small viewport. Earth. Home. My home. Where I'm from, before I made questionable life choices and ended up here. Lyra moved to the viewport, her reflection ghosting across the glass. She touched the transparent surface gently, and Eli noticed again how her skin seemed to hold light just beneath it, like someone had replaced her circulatory system with fiber optics on a dimmer switch. Earth, she repeated, and the word came out almost right, just slightly musical around the edges. Then she said something else, longer, pointing at the planet with one hand while her other hand gestured at the space around it. I have no idea what that means, but your commitment to the bid is impressive. She turned to him and made a gesture he'd seen before, hands moving in a spiral pattern, then spreading outward. She'd done it yesterday when looking at the station star charts, and the day before when Eli had shown her the cafeteria's protein synthesizer creating something that was allegedly chicken. Big? Eli tried. Lots? Many? He mimicked her gesture, feeling ridiculous. Lyra's face did something complicated. Not quite a smile, not quite a wince. She reached for his personal datapad, which he'd left on the desk because he'd given up on having boundaries around day 2. Her fingers moved across the interface with surprising familiarity, pulling up the drawing application. She sketched quickly. Stars, or dots meant to represent stars, scattered across the screen. Then she drew lines between them, connecting them into a web. More dots appeared beyond the web, and she pointed to those, then to herself, then to the web, making a movement that suggested travel. You're from out there, Eli said slowly. Outside the mapped systems. And you came here. To the web. To us. He paused. Why would anyone voluntarily come here? Have you seen our coffee? Lyra made a sound that might have been laughter. At least, Eli chose to believe it was laughter, because the alternative was that she was choking and he really didn't know alien first aid. She pulled up another drawing interface and created a new image. A simple stick figure, apparently stick figures were universal, standing alone. Then she drew more stick figures around it, lots of them, all doing different things. Some grouped together, some separate, some with lines connecting them to others. She pointed to the whole chaotic mess and then at the window, at Earth. You're watching us. Studying us. Eli felt something cold settle in his stomach. Like we're lab rats in a really big, really depressing experiment. She tilted her head, considering, then added more to her drawing. She sketched what might have been a building falling down, then drew a new building rising up in its place, different but still standing. Then she pointed to herself again and made a gesture like something crumbling, followed by the rebuilding motion. Your people went through something. Something bad. And you rebuilt. Eli looked at the drawing, at Earth hanging in the viewport, at Lyra's patient expression. And now you're here to see if we can do the same thing. Or if we're just going to keep building the same burning building over and over until we run out of materials. Lyra's ears shifted forward slightly, which Eli had learned meant he'd said something that interested her. She nodded, then added one more element to her drawing, a question mark next to the falling building. Yeah, Eli said quietly. That is the question, isn't it? His comm unit chose that moment to destroy the contemplative atmosphere with its aggressive chirping. Eli grabbed it before it could wake the dead or alert station security, whichever came first. Vasquez, where are you? Chen's voice carried the special kind of stress that came from dealing with bureaucracy. We've got inspectors coming through in 2 hours. Full sweep. They're looking for the ghost signal from docking bay 3. Eli's brain performed rapid calculations, none of them optimistic. Define full sweep. Every bay, every corridor, every closet. And yes, before you ask, that includes maintenance areas. They want to inspect the entire station grid. That's excessive. That's protocols after an unexplained docking event. Where are you? Fixing the ventilation system in Section C. You know how it gets. It's fine though, right? You didn't find anything weird in Bay 3? Eli looked at Lyra, who was now examining his collection of broken circuit boards with the fascination of an anthropologist discovering pottery shards. Define weird. Vasquez. Everything's fine. Just a sensor glitch. Happens all the time. I'll write up a report using lots of technical terms that make it sound like I did something important. Chen sighed with their entire soul. 2 hours. Make sure you're visible and looking busy when they come through. The comm went dead. Eli stared at it, then at Lyra, then at the viewport showing the vast emptiness of space that was starting to look increasingly appealing as a hiding spot. So, he said brightly, how do you feel about going on an adventure? And by adventure, I mean hiding in places that are definitely not OSHA compliant while people with authority issues sweep the station looking for you. Lyra didn't understand the words, but she apparently understood tone well enough. She looked at him, then at the door, then back at him with an expression that suggested she was questioning his competence. Hey, I've kept you hidden for 3 days. That's basically a miracle given how nosy everyone is here. Plus, I know places. Eli grabbed his emergency kit, which was mostly protein bars and spare circuit boards. Secret places. Places that don't exist on the official station maps because someone during construction decided to just wall off sections rather than finish them properly. He pulled up a schematic on his datapad, highlighting a route that went through maintenance shafts, behind a water recycling system, and into a defunct observation deck that had been closed after someone realized it had a lovely view of absolutely nothing interesting. Lyra studied the map, traced the route with one finger, then looked at Eli with what he was becoming certain was skepticism. I know it looks complicated, but trust me. I'm a professional. She raised one eyebrow. Just one. Eli hadn't known that eyebrow raising was a universal expression of doubt, but apparently evolution had some strong opinions about facial expressions. Professional might be generous, he conceded. I'm a competent amateur with above-average luck and a strong survival instinct. Also, I haven't gotten us caught yet, which honestly should count for something. Lyra made the spiraling gesture again, but smaller this time, directed at Eli himself rather than at concepts like planets or civilizations. Then she smiled, actually smiled, the first real one he'd seen, and her skin brightened just slightly, enough that shadows shifted across the small room. Was that a compliment? Did you just compliment my chaos management skills? Eli felt absurdly pleased. Because I'll take it. I'll absolutely take it. The station's announcement system crackled to life, someone declaring something tedious about shift changes and maintenance schedules. They had maybe 90 minutes before inspectors started their sweep. Eli grabbed a thermal blanket, some ration packs, and his backup data pad. All right, let's go not be found. Try to look like you belong here. Actually, no, scratch that, nobody here looks like they belong here. Just try to look miserable and overworked. That's the standard. Lyra followed him to the door, which she kicked again instead of waving at. The door opened without complaint. You're going to teach me terrible habits, Eli said, but he was smiling. They stepped into the corridor together, and Eli pretended not to notice how his heart was beating faster than the situation strictly required. The defunct observation deck smelled like abandoned dreams and possibly mold, though Eli wasn't sure if mold could grow in a vacuum-adjacent environment. He'd stopped questioning the station's ability to cultivate problems in impossible conditions around month 7. Welcome to my secret lair, Eli said, gesturing at the cramped space with its one working light panel and viewport that offered a stunning view of the void. I know it's not much, but it has the one feature we desperately need right now, which is that nobody remembers it exists. Lyra entered cautiously, her ears swiveling slightly as if listening to frequencies Eli couldn't detect. She moved to the viewport and placed her hand against it, and that subtle luminescence beneath her skin brightened enough to cast faint shadows. You do that when you're happy, Eli observed, settling onto the floor because the observation deck's furniture had been removed back when the station decided this section wasn't worth maintaining. The glowing thing. Took me 2 days to figure out it wasn't just the lighting in here being weird. Well, weirder than usual. She turned to look at him, and something in her expression shifted. More open, maybe. Less guarded. Eli pulled out his datapad, calling up the translation program that he'd been feeding with every word, gesture, and sound for 3 days straight. The algorithm claimed it was now operating at 17% comprehension, which was either impressive or depressing depending on how optimistic you were feeling. Okay, he said, patting the floor beside him. We've got probably an hour before I need to show my face during inspection. Let's see if we can get this percentage up to something respectable. Or at least something above failing grade. Lyra sat cross-legged facing him, close enough that he could see the way her ears caught the dim light. She pulled her own makeshift drawing tool from her pocket. Actually one of Eli's spare circuit testers that she'd repurposed because apparently tool theft was also universal. She drew quickly on her palm-sized screen. A circle, then another circle around it, then paths connecting them. Orbit, Eli tried. Satellite. Moon. She shook her head, added more detail. The inner circle grew features, landmasses, maybe, or something like them. The outer circle became more elaborate, with structures extending from it. A planet and a station. Like here. Like us right now. Lyra nodded, then drew more stations, many of them, forming a ring around the planet. She pointed to them, then to herself, and said something that the translator caught as, home, many, circle protection. You live on stations. Orbital habitats. Eli leaned closer, watching her draw. All of you. Not on the planet. She made a gesture that might have meant yes or might have meant it's complicated. Then she drew the planet again, but this time she marked it with scratches, harsh lines across its surface. She touched these marks gently, almost reverently, and said something the translator gave up on entirely. Something happened to your planet, Eli said quietly. Something bad enough that you moved into orbit. All of you. Lyra met his eyes, and for a moment Eli saw something in them that transcended language barriers, grief that had aged into wisdom, loss that had transformed into purpose. She drew more, working faster now. Cities falling, structures collapsing, but then new images, people working together, building, reaching upward. The orbital stations taking shape. Time compressed into simple lines and dots. You almost destroyed yourselves, Eli breathed. And then you stopped. You changed. She nodded, then pointed at the viewport, at Earth hanging in the distance. She drew Earth on her screen, surrounded it with question marks, and looked at him expectantly. Can we do it? Eli said. That's why you're here. Watching us tear ourselves apart and wondering if we're capable of stopping before it's too late. Lyra made a sound of confirmation, then added something else to her drawing. Stick figures again, but these were reaching toward each other, connecting. The translator caught fragments, together, choice, possible. Possible, Eli repeated. Not guaranteed. Just possible. He laughed, but it came out bitter. That's more optimistic than most people back on Earth would give us credit for. She tilted her head, studying him with that unnerving focus that made Eli feel like he was being read at a fundamental level. Then she poked him in the chest, actually poked him, her finger warm against his sternum, and said something that came through the translator as, "You, hope, still." Me. I'm the guy who hides in maintenance corridors and argues with coffee machines. I'm not exactly humanity's shining representative. Lyra poked him again, more insistent. She pulled up his datapad and navigated to his personal files with the casual invasion of privacy that Eli had somehow become comfortable with over the past 3 days. She found what she was looking for, his application to the station, written 3 years ago when he'd still believed in things like advancement and purpose. She pointed to a line he'd written, "I want to help build something that matters." That was a long time ago, Eli said. Before I learned that what we're actually building is a very expensive observation post for watching everything fall apart in high definition. She shook her head firmly, her ears flattening slightly in what he'd learned was disagreement. She pointed to the line again, then to him, then made a gesture encompassing the small space where they were hiding. You think me hiding you from inspectors is building something that matters? Lyra made a frustrated sound and grabbed his hand, placing it palm up between them. She traced letters on his palm with her finger, slowly, concentrating, CHOICE. The translator program chose that moment to ping with a breakthrough. 17% jumped to 23%, and suddenly words were flowing with slightly more coherence. Every choice, builds, Lyra said haltingly, the words heavily accented but unmistakably English. Small choices, become big, become everything. Eli stared at her. You've been learning English. This whole time, while I've been flailing around with hand gestures and badly drawn stick figures, you've been actually learning. She made a sound that was definitely laughter this time. Your stick figures, very bad. But helpful. I'm going to choose to take that as a compliment. You should. They sat there in the dim observation deck, and Eli became aware of how small the space was, how close they were sitting, how her hand was still resting near his where she traced the word on his palm. Why did you really come here? He asked. I mean, I get the observation mission thing, but you personally. Why you? Lyra was quiet for a long moment, her luminescence fading to almost nothing. I volunteered, she said finally. Because I remember. When my world was breaking. I remember thinking, someone should care. Someone from somewhere else. Someone should witness. And no one came. No one came. She looked at Earth through the viewport. So I came here. To witness. To care. To see if maybe someone like you exists. Someone who still wants to build things that matter. Eli's comm unit buzzed. He glanced at it. Inspection teams were on Deck C, moving methodically through the station. 20 minutes, maybe less, before they reached this section. We should move, he said, but didn't move. Yes, Lyra agreed, also not moving. They're going to find that your pod is gone from the bay. I deleted the docking logs, but there's probably physical evidence. Scorch marks or unusual were patterns or something equally inconvenient. Inconvenient, Lyra repeated, testing the word. Good word. Your language has many good words for problems. We've had a lot of practice with problems. It's kind of our thing. She smiled at that, and her glow strengthened again. Mine too. My people, we had practice also. Much practice. Many mistakes. But you got better. We chose better, she corrected. Every day. Every person. Small choices. Eli's datapad pinged with an alert. The inspection team was entering this sector. Time to go, he said, standing and offering his hand to help her up. She took it, her skin warm and slightly electric against his palm. They moved to the observation deck service exit, a narrow corridor that wound behind the station's water recycling system. The sound of footsteps echoed from somewhere above them, filtered through metal and distance. Where next? Lyra whispered. Eli consulted his mental map of the station's forgotten spaces. I know a place. Storage bay that got walled off when they reconfigured the station's layout. It's not on any current schematics. We'll be safe there for a few hours at least. And then we figure out what happens next. Together. Lyra's hand tightened on his for just a moment. Together. Another good word. Yeah, Eli said, leading her into the darkness of the maintenance corridor, the sound of inspectors growing closer behind them. It really is. They moved through the station's hidden passages, two beings from different worlds, making small choices that were rapidly becoming something much larger than either of them had planned for. Above them, Earth continued its slow rotation, broken and beautiful, waiting to see what humanity would choose to build next. The restricted files opened with embarrassing ease, which told Eli everything he needed to know about station security priorities. If they'd spent half as much energy protecting classified information as they did monitoring coffee rations, maybe he wouldn't currently be staring at documents that were making his stomach do complicated gymnastics. This is bad, Eli said to the empty server room. This is really, monumentally bad. He'd only meant to scrub Lyra from the sensor logs. A simple data cleanup, the kind of minor rule-bending that kept stations like Sigma-7 functioning when bureaucracy and reality had a disagreement. Instead, he'd stumbled through a poorly encrypted firewall into files marked with so many classification codes that they'd apparently run out of ominous adjectives. Project Threshold, the header read, which was the kind of name you gave something when you wanted to sound important while being deliberately vague. Eli scrolled through the document, his eyes catching on phrases that kept getting worse. Extraterrestrial contact confirmed 2047. Preemptive defense posturing. Resource acquisition protocols. Neutralization of potential territorial threats. Oh no, Eli said. Oh no, no, no. The files detailed decades of surveillance. Ships detected at the edge of the solar system. Communication attempts that went unanswered. And then, gradually, a shift in Earth's governing bodies from curiosity to paranoia to outright hostility. Plans for weapons platforms. Strategies for first strike scenarios. Contingencies built on assumptions that any species capable of reaching Earth must want something worth taking by force. Eli found grainy images, ships that looked nothing like human designs, all organic curves and impossible angles. And in one image, enhanced and annotated with technical analysis, a figure stood in what might have been a doorway. The image quality was terrible, but the ears were unmistakable. His hands were shaking. He'd been on the station for 3 years, fixing air recyclers and pretending the biggest problems were malfunctioning synthesizers, while the entire Earth government had been preparing for a war that his current roommate didn't even know about. Former roommate, technically. They'd moved beyond sharing quarters into sharing increasingly creative hiding spots, which wasn't quite the same thing. The door to the server room hissed open. Eli practically jumped through the ceiling, his hand slapping the datapad screen dark. Easy there, Chen said, carrying their tablet and looking exhausted. You act like you're doing something illegal. Just routine maintenance, Eli said, too quickly. The servers were making a noise. A suspicious noise. Very suspicious. The servers are always making suspicious noises. That's their natural state. Chen dropped into a chair that complained about the responsibility. Inspections done. They found nothing, which means either there was nothing to find or you're better at hiding things than we gave you credit for. I'm going to take that as a compliment. You probably shouldn't. Chen rubbed their eyes. They're sending up military consultants next week. Full security audit. They're convinced something docked here that wasn't supposed to. Eli's blood went cold. Military consultants. That seems excessive. That's what I said. But apparently there's been chatter. Intelligence picked up something about unscheduled contact events across multiple orbital platforms. They're paranoid about infiltration. Chen looked at him directly. You're sure you didn't see anything weird in Bay 3? Define weird. Vasquez. I saw a sensor glitch and some residual electromagnetic interference that I traced to a faulty coupling in the docking mechanism. I wrote a whole report about it. Lots of technical terms. Very boring. Chen stared at him for a long moment. You know what I think? That I'm an exemplary employee who deserves a raise. I think you're a terrible liar, but you're good at fixing things. Chen stood, heading for the door. So if something needs fixing, I trust you'll handle it. And if something doesn't need fixing, I trust you'll be smart enough to leave it alone. They left, and Eli sat in the server room's humming silence, trying to process whether he'd just been given permission or a warning or both. He found Lyra in the walled-off storage bay, sitting cross-legged beneath a defunct light panel, working on her communication device. The thing looked like someone had crossed a smartphone with a musical instrument and then gave up halfway through. We need to talk, Eli said. She looked up, and something in his face made her set the device aside immediately. Bad talk. Very bad talk. He sat down across from her, pulled out his datapad, and showed her the files. I found these. I wasn't looking for them, but I found them, and now I can't unfind them. Lyra took the datapad, her eyes moving across the text. Her English was better than his attempt at her language would ever be, but technical military documentation was probably challenging in any tongue. She read in silence for what felt like an hour but was probably only minutes. Her luminescence dimmed almost to nothing. Your people know, she said finally. About my people. About us watching. Yeah. And they've decided that watching equals threatening, which equals we should build really big weapons just in case. We are not threatening. I know that. You know that. But fear doesn't really care about facts. It just cares about possibilities and worst-case scenarios. Eli ran his hands through his hair. They're talking about preemptive strikes. About neutralizing potential threats before they become actual threats. It's paranoia dressed up as strategy. Lyra handed back the datapad. My people, we did this also. Before. When we were breaking our world. What did you do? We were afraid. We saw others who were different and thought, they will take what is ours. They will hurt us. We will hurt them first. Her hands moved in agitated patterns. We built weapons. Made plans. Prepared for wars that might never come. What stopped you? The war came. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the dim emergency lighting. Not with others from Sky. With ourselves. We fought each other because we practiced fighting so much we forgot how to do anything else. And then we had nothing left to fight with or fight for. The storage bay's recycled air hummed through ancient vents. Somewhere above them, the station continued its orbit, and Earth continued its slow spin through the void. Is that what you're reporting back? Eli asked quietly. That we're going to destroy ourselves. That we're not worth saving. I do not know yet. Lyra moved closer, closing the space between them until they were sitting knee to knee in the cramped bay. I am still deciding. Still watching. What would change your mind? What would make you think we're capable of being better? You already did. Eli blinked. What? You found me. Strange person. Unauthorized. Possibly dangerous. You could report. Could turn me to authorities. Could protect yourself. She touched his hand where it rested on his knee. You chose different. You chose to help. To hide. To risk yourself for someone you do not know. That's just basic decency. Yes, Lyra said. Exactly, yes. Basic decency. The foundation. The small choice that builds everything else. One person making one choice isn't enough to save a species. No. But it is enough to prove that saving is possible. She picked up her communication device, turned it over in her hands. I must return soon. To my people. To give report. To tell them what I learned about Earth, about humans, about whether you will choose to change or choose to end. Something sharp lodged itself in Eli's chest. When? Days. Maybe week. My ship is coming. And what will you tell them? Lyra was quiet for a long moment. I will tell truth. That humans are complicated. That you are capable of both great cruelty and great kindness. That you are afraid, and fear makes you dangerous, but that some of you still choose hope even when hope is difficult. That's a pretty generous interpretation given the military files I just showed you. The military files show fear, Lyra said. But you show hope. Both are true. Both are real. The question is, which one will win? Eli looked at his datapad, at the classified files that painted humanity as paranoid and aggressive, preparing for battles that might only exist in imagination. Then he looked at Lyra, at her pointed ears and luminescent skin and eyes that held patience earned through her people's own near extinction. I don't know, he admitted. I really don't know. Neither do I, she said. But I think maybe not knowing is the point. If it was certain, if the ending was already written, there would be no reason to try. The uncertainty is where choice lives. That's very philosophical for someone who's been learning English for less than a week. Some concepts translate well. She smiled slightly. Also, your language has very good words for uncertainty. Almost as many as words for problems. We're experienced in both. They sat together in the abandoned storage bay, while above them the station systems prepared for military consultants and security audits, and Earth turned slowly through space, and somewhere beyond the mapped systems, Lyra's people waited for her report on whether humanity deserved intervention or abandonment. For what it's worth, Eli said, I'm glad you came. Even if everything is complicated and potentially catastrophic, I'm glad. Lyra's luminescence brightened just slightly. Me also, she said. Very glad. The observation deck was empty when they arrived, which Eli chose to interpret as the universe finally doing him a favor. He'd spent the past 2 days rerouting patrol schedules and convincing Chen that the deck's life support was malfunctioning and needed immediate quarantine, which wasn't technically a lie since the life support had been questionable for years. Lyra stood at the viewport, her hand pressed against the transparent surface. Earth filled most of the view, blue and brown and white, wrapped in clouds that looked deceptively peaceful from orbit. Your ship arrives tonight, Eli said, because pretending they had more time felt worse than acknowledging they didn't. Yes. Midnight, station time. She didn't turn from the window. They will retrieve me. Take me home. I will give my report. And what will that report say? The truth. That Earth is complicated. That humans are capable of both destruction and compassion. That you prepare for war while some of you still work for peace. She finally looked at him. That I met someone who chose kindness when he could have chosen safety. I'm just a maintenance tech who's really good at breaking rules. No. You are more. Her English had improved dramatically, though she still sometimes arranged words in ways that made them sound like poetry. You are proof that individuals can choose differently than their systems. That one person's decision matters even when everything else is broken. Eli moved to stand beside her at the viewport. You know what's funny? When I applied to work here, I wrote this whole thing about wanting to help build something that matters. Then I spent 3 years fixing air filters and pretending that was enough. And then you showed up and suddenly I'm hiding alien visitors and breaking into classified files and actually building something. Even if that something is just this. Us. Whatever this is. This is friendship, Lyra said simply. This is connection across distance. This is the beginning of understanding. Is it enough? For your report. To convince your people that we're worth the trouble. Lyra's ears shifted in that way that meant she was thinking carefully. I do not decide alone. Many scouts watched many places on Earth. We will share all observations. Compare. Discuss. Together we decide. Democracy. That's encouraging, I guess. You have democracy also. Yeah, and look how great that's working out. Eli gestured at Earth. We're so good at making collective decisions that we've collectively decided to ignore every warning sign until the planet is actively on fire. But you are still trying. Some of you. Fighting to change. To be better. She turned fully to face him. That is what I will emphasize. That capability exists. That potential remains. They stood close enough that Eli could see the way light moved beneath her skin, shifting like bioluminescent tide pools. He'd gotten used to it over the past week, this constant subtle glow that responded to her emotions. Right now it was dim, muted, almost sad. I'm going to miss this, he said. Having someone to talk to who doesn't think my existential crisis is inappropriate workplace conversation. Crisis can be very appropriate. Crisis means you are paying attention. See, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. You make hopelessness sound almost optimistic. Lyra smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I learned from watching you. You complain about everything while fixing everything. You say you have given up while never actually giving up. It is very human. Very contradictory. Very inspiring. I'm really not inspiring. I'm just stubborn and bad at knowing when to quit. Sometimes those are same thing. Eli's comm unit buzzed. He glanced at it, Chen, asking about his location. He muted it. Whatever administrative crisis was developing could wait. He had maybe an hour before Lyra's people arrived, and he was going to spend it here, watching Earth turn beneath them. Can I ask you something? Eli said. And I want you to be honest. Always. Do I look strange to you? Lyra tilted her head, considering. Strange? What is strange? Different. Alien. Wrong, somehow. I mean, we're from completely different worlds. Different biology, different evolution, different everything. When you look at me, do you see something fundamentally other? She studied him with that intense focus he'd come to recognize. Her eyes traced his face like she was memorizing details, cataloging differences and similarities. When I first saw you, she said slowly, I saw threat. Unknown variable. Potential danger. My training said to observe from distance, to remain hidden, to gather data without contact. But then you spoke to me. Made jokes when you should have been afraid. Tried to help when you could have reported. And I stopped seeing unknown variable. I started seeing person. That's not really an answer. Yes, it is. She reached out, her hand hovering near his face like she was asking permission. He nodded, and she traced the curve of his ear, normal, round, entirely human. You look different than me. But different is not strange. Different is just, different. And I have learned that different can be wonderful. Eli felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. You're saying I'm wonderful? That's bold. I am saying you are worth finding. That meeting you made this entire mission meaningful in ways I did not expect. Her luminescence brightened, casting dancing shadows across the observation deck. I came here to witness humanity. Instead I found human. Individual. You. And that changed everything. How? Before, humans were data. Abstract concept. Species to evaluate and categorize. But you cannot categorize someone who makes you laugh. Cannot reduce to data someone who risks themselves for stranger. She lowered her hand. You made it personal. Made it matter in new way. Is that good? For your report? I do not know. It makes report more complicated. Harder to stay objective. She paused. But yes. I think good. I think maybe we need more personal. More individual connection. Less abstract evaluation. Eli's calm buzzed again, more insistent. Chen, now with backup from station command. The military consultants had arrived early, were sweeping the station ahead of schedule. They had 20 minutes, maybe less. They're here, Eli said. Your ride or my problems, I'm not sure which arrives first. Lyra checked her communication device. My ship is close. Very close now. So this is it. End of our very brief, very illegal friendship. End of this part. Not end of friendship. She grabbed his hand. Eli. Listen to me. What happens next is not finished. Your story, humanity's story, it is still being written. The ending is not decided. But you're leaving. I am leaving to advocate. To argue for patience. For giving Earth more time. For believing that people like you exist in enough numbers to make difference. That's a lot of faith to put in a species that's actively trying to destroy itself. Yes, Lyra agreed. But faith is not about certainty. Faith is about choosing to believe even when evidence is unclear. You taught me that. You had no reason to trust me, to help me, but you chose to believe I was worth the risk. The observation deck's door alarm chimed. Someone was overriding the locks. Go, Eli said. Your ship must be in range. Go now. Come with me. Eli stared at her. What? Come with me. To my people. Be witness. Be voice for humanity. Show them what I have seen. Her hand tightened on his. Be proof that connection is possible. I can't just leave. I have a job. Responsibilities. A truly impressive collection of broken circuit boards. You have choice, Lyra corrected. You always have choice. The door began to slide open. Voices echoed from the corridor, military consultants, demanding access, threatening consequences. Lyra's skin flared bright enough to cast real shadows. Through the viewport, Eli could see it, a ship materializing from stealth, all impossible curves and shifting surfaces that hurt to look at directly. Do I look strange to you? She asked suddenly, urgently. Answer true. Right now. Eli looked at her pointed ears and luminescent skin and eyes that held hope mixed with fear. He thought about the past week, about hiding in maintenance corridors and teaching each other languages and learning that connection didn't require similarity. He thought about classified files and military paranoia and species preparing for wars that didn't need to happen. Strange? No. The words came easily, surprising him with their certainty. You look like someone finally worth finding. Lyra's face did something complicated. Her eyes brightened with moisture that caught the light of her skin, tears that glowed as they traced down her cheeks. "Why are you crying?" Eli asked, suddenly alarmed. "Did I say something wrong?" "No. You said something right. Very right." She was crying and smiling simultaneously, her luminescence pulsing. "In all my time watching humans, I never thought, never expected someone would see me as something other than specimen or threat or curiosity. You see me as person. As friend. As someone worth finding." "Well, yeah. Obviously." The door burst fully open. Security personnel flooded in, weapons drawn, shouting protocols and procedures. Lyra's ship appeared at the viewport, a portal opening in its side. "Last chance," she said, her hand still in his. "Come with me. Or stay. Either way, know that you changed everything. You made me believe that understanding is possible. That connection matters more than fear." Eli looked at the security team advancing. Looked at Earth hanging in the viewport, broken and beautiful. Looked at Lyra, crying luminescent tears because someone had called her worth finding. He made his choice. "Okay," he said. "Let's go build something that matters." They ran for the viewport together, and Lyra's ship pulled them through, and the last thing Eli saw before the portal closed was Earth growing smaller, still turning, still hoping, still capable of choosing better.